pa-pa-pam, pa-pa-pa-pam, ya-pa-pa-pam, and not too soon, ya-pa-pam.
Yeah, this is yeah.
Ya-pa-pa-pam, ya-pa-pa-pam. Yeah, this. Oh yeah.
I'm sorry, in my score, I'm sure it was.
I believe you. I believe you. And again. Look where is the whole 2/3 of the keyboard is unused. Only this extreme. And then you get. I'm by nature a very curious person, and I'm full of curiosity to see what it is that such talented young people, from their perspective, with their curiosity from today's world, how they come to this music and how we communicate about that. I find that, for myself, a very enriching experience. With Beethoven, I think that the piano sonatas represent not only for the pianist, but for all musicians and music lovers, something unique in his output, and maybe unique in the output of many other composers. You know, it was Hans von Bülow who said that the Well-Tempered Clavier of Bach was the Old Testament and the Beethoven sonatas were the New Testament. You know, I don't want to imbue this works with religious significance, but I think what he meant by that was that this is the basis of our knowledge of music.
We all look at the same score, which is Beethoven wrote, right? But everybody has a different thinking, and obviously different, you know, doesn't mean good, or you're different, that doesn't mean you're different in a good way. And I think, but when you're talking about Master Barenboim, he can really bring the knowledge, the structure, how to put every element to one big shape.
Really wonderful language. No, it's really wonderful. It has so much color, and it has so much. It has its own grandeur. If there is one basic criticism, if you will allow me, is that all this could actually and should be better structured. I think the more a piece of music has many different characters and many different colors and attributes, the more it's important to think of it strategically. In other words, to know, and because of this, that, and the other, I'm going here, in the tempo, in the dynamic, in the phrasing, in the articulation, so that you never find yourself in a situation where suddenly you don't have to manipulate the music, but you should also not be manipulated by the music. I noticed that particularly in moments where a new section starts, like for a moment I thought, where is he going? Where is the music going? You know, I think when you start, when you have a clear new beginning of a sequence, it's like when you write and you finish the paragraph and you start a new paragraph, it has to be very clearly enunciated. And then, of course, you know, when you go, you get all of that, and then you have the transition parts, and this you do wonderfully. You prepare this. You know, this is the dominant and the color, and you're going into the major. Or the transitions are very expressive, the way you play them, and that is the most difficult. What I think we can still maybe get a little clearer is when you arrive at the next section, really how to get to that. Also, I know that it not only tolerates, but it requires a lot of freedom in the tempo also. This is certainly not a metronomic piece, but sometimes I miss the pulse. You know, you have the different elements. You have the beginning, which even though it is pianissimo, it's only an arpeggio. It must have also already a substance,
yes,
so that it is the form, that it's not an introduction. And then if you lengthen the empty bar so much, you soften the impact of the modulation. 4, 1, 2, 3. You can take a little bit of time, but not.
That's really.
It is a little. It goes so much that then you go again. Then you have that. There is a basic pulse which you can alter as the music requires. But this, I think, if you find that a little bit in a more strict sense, then all the expressivity will be even stronger. Right? Would you like to start once more? Langland, do you think of that all in one, as one instrument, as
maybe when it comes here, it's something else because the
correct.
Yeah.
You must play without changing the volume, as if it's a new instrument in the orchestra is coming.
See.
Yes, with the harmony. You have no harmony until then. The chord will help you. That's right. Don't play the harmony, the left hand too soft. That's it. 2, 3. And also, don't. I would not finish that, because then there is no element of surprise. But you have to leave it in mid-air. Of course, this is a tension, and this is the release. But I would release it a little bit less, so that then you have the possibility to go into the strange world. And if anything, take the time already in the sound, rather than before it. That's it.
That is too loud.
A little bit too loud. This is not so much. But what I think also important. You know, you play. You have a tendency to play. It's more of a passing note. That's it. Go on. Yeah, you must say. That was good.
Yeah.
Before you arrived too
Russian,
you arrived too soon on 3. Well, look, I think you can make it. You have this on the arpeggio. Then you repeat in a. I think now you have a new texture. It's not this. It's
like,
it must be a little bit. There must be a little bit more contact of the finger with the sound. Here you can play like this, but here you need that, because and commentary, it builds up. Unless you play the first group clearly enunciated with the sound really centered, we will not be able to follow. You must really time it perfectly. Pa 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 pam, pa 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 pam, pa 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 pam, ya pa pa pam, and not too soon. Ya pa pam.
yeah, this is
Ya pa pa pam, ya pa pa pam. Yeah, this. Don't let loose the tension. That's it. Why don't you play from here?
Yeah.
This must be subito piano, no? Piano, subito.
Yeah, and then
You want to play more because of the
Yeah,
pianissimo.
yeah,
but if you play the chord full enough,
Okay.
if you the chord, yeah,
and then
yeah. I'm not 100% convinced also about this. This is yap-pa-pa-pam.
This should be the
A little bit shorter. Yap-ta-ta-tam. Yeah. Yeah. Why don't you play once more from there? You make the crescendo. You must believe, Lang, you must believe that you can actually make the crescendo on the one note, on the C. That's it. More. You make your life unnecessarily difficult if you don't play the chord before that really full. This is not full enough.
You mean
Here.
the
This is why you play this. You have to. That's it.
I should leave a little space.
Yes.
Right? And then
And out of that. I think once you hit the fortissimo, you must have a tempo there. You can play the upbeat if you want a little free. But once you get this is also a rhythmical structure. I don't think you can go little Keep the tempo now. Okay? I'm not trying to put you in a straitjacket, but I'm trying to remind you of what the pulse is that you created.
Yeah. Maestro, once we have more notes, like here, can we really hear it? Because I just thought sometimes if the tempo is so strict.
No. I don't mean the strictness for that. I mean the strictness of the syncopation.
Okay.
If you don't have strictness with syncopations, the syncopations lose their nature. The syncopation is a syncopation in relation to the rhythm. And therefore, if that is free, the syncopation loses its strength.
See.
But this, of course, you can take the time.
Yeah. Got it. No.
Okay?
This belongs to a new paragraph.
Yes.
Here.
This is a new paragraph which is going to lead you into this, to the major. So you need a completely different world from what comes before and from what comes afterwards. And you know, I think when you play, listen. This is what we need to hear. Now comes a transformation. Commentary. Again. Commentary. You must always have a complete independence of what is the statement and what is the commentary. It is not. So when you start, I would play those a little longer with sustain. Also now, I'm exaggerating to make it clear for you. Don't play. Huh?
Yes.
Yeah. This is too dry. This is it's too soft. soft. You're not going to. Don't forget, look. Only here there is no tension. Harmonically. This is a search, and now you found it. So don't get too soft too soon. Yes. Yeah. Also, what a genius of not repeating the chord. In other words, once it is here, the E flat is there, this doesn't need a chord. You know, a lesser composer would have written.
Yeah, because the beat still goes on.
And also so that you get, it's not, but it is. Now open up there. No, subito. No, you cheat. You cheat, you must play the left hand. That's right, the crescendo in the left hand to the end. That's right, that's right. You must always remember, it requires an element of courage to play a crescendo to the end before a subito piano. It takes you the courage to go to the end before you get softer, and not to round it up and get softer at the last moment. Okay, maybe once more, just around there. Yeah, somewhere around there. No. This is not.
Even.
Yes.
It's like,
Yes. Yeah. Maybe if you can play the repeated notes a little drier, then you will get. Open up the key. Now this too fast. Now you can take time if you want. But when you repeat a figure with changing the harmony, and you cannot change the tempo, otherwise we don't notice the similarity, and we don't notice the repeat. And listen. Then you can take time if you want. And then, Lagna, since we are here, when you are here, don't give away. You must think long term. That's what I meant to tell you strategically. Don't give away this pianissimo. You play this pianissimo beautifully, but you mustn't give it away. This is only piano.
oh, that's right.
The pianissimo is only there, so that you know that you must miss a breath there because of that. It's a sudden change. It's not something that has been there earlier.
Expected, yeah.
Go with the ear. Half. Something like that. Something like that. And make sure that it is. Make sure you don't hear. It's too loud. Pa, and then subito. But this is, I wish I could hear more. It's not now for the. Yeah, that's not enough. You have pianissimo, forte, subito, and fortissimo.
Yeah.
Must be very clear. Go down. No. Down to forte, to single forte.
Yeah.
From double forte to single. Otherwise, you will not be able to do that. That's it. Also here, you get the repetition of the. So and then double. Otherwise, one doesn't understand the connection.
Yeah.
Not too much pedal. They're going here. Yes.
Okay.
And more. This is always, excuse me, it's too soon. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. Yeah. Otherwise, you lose the quality of the breathlessness. If you play. If anything, rather too late, rather than too soon. Okay?
Yeah.
Always still 12. Yes, very good. Very good. But don't forget the 12. Last one, you're all the time. This must be definite. You don't fall, you place it so that it is clear it's not going to move anymore. That's it. Same.
This is similar to the
In major. Same thing now. You must make top on. This is the connection. What's the chord? The chord. Yeah. All 3 notes.
Oh, I have a question here. This is a forzando and a piano?
Yeah.
How we do
in
this?
piano. Sforzando piano.
Oh, I see.
Sforzando in piano.
I see. I saw this like...
No, that's a forte piano.
Yeah. Oh, that's the problem. Okay. Oh, forzando in piano.
Not too soft, not too soft, not too soft. No, legato, legato.
Same thing.
I hear. That's it. That's it. Don't lose the tempo now. Don't lose the pulse. To make the change. Mark the change, and now. For the change a little longer. Half pedal, half pedal. Change as often as you can. To voice. Don't lose the tempo, don't lose the tempo. That's it. I think that's all we have time for today. Yes. You still have a concert. Do you have any questions or remarks?
I have a question for both of you. Do you see images while you play?
Yeah, I do actually. Yeah, all kind of things. Sometimes for Beethoven, I think it's slightly different than Chopin. The image, I feel more, I see more buildings rather than colors. Certainly, of course, you see lots of colors in the music as well. But for those classic pieces, especially sonatas by Beethoven. Yeah. And I think it's more about how to build this building, like what Maestro just been through to know the concept of this big construction. Okay. Yeah.
I very seldom have images. I'm more the other way around. I tend to hear music when I see images in live. When I see it, in other words, I don't think of, oh, in that passage, I see the mountains of Bavaria. It's usually, when I see the mountains of Bavaria, I think of the A-flat section of this and such and such. It's true. It's true. Do you have images when you play?
Yeah, that's right.
Well, sometimes when I play, I just think about like an image that, maybe like a story that just like goes with what I'm playing at that moment and what I'm thinking.
Well, in the end, whether you imagine your own story in words or in sounds, in the end, it doesn't matter. What is important is that when you play, you're actually telling a story, and the listener gets your story.
Think more about Bavarian Mountain.
At one point you said, believe that you can do a crescendo on one note. Now, I know physically that's not possible, but it sure sounded like it happened. Can you talk about that aspect of sound, the illusion of sound?
But then it wouldn't be an illusion anymore.
Yeah, that's right.
I play a little bit of piano, and that's why I'm asking.
When I was very young, if I can tell you a little personal anecdote. When I was very young, I think I must have been 14 at the time, I was taken to play for none other than Vladimir Horowitz. And I was very unhappy about the fact, because since my childhood, I had been the greatest Rubinstein fan. And Rubinstein knew my parents since the time my mother was pregnant with me. And so since the day I came into this world, this was it for me, and to go and see Horowitz was, So I went already, in a negative frame of mind. And I was 14 and probably very childish, even more so than now. And
That's right.
I played for him. And he said some nice things, and he said some critical things. And at the end of the afternoon, he said something which I have never forgotten. He says, you know, you must always have will. I thought, what, will? No, will, of course. Will. In other words, you must want. It's not enough to know there's a crescendo. It's not enough to do the crescendo. You must want. You must have the will to do that. And if you have the will and you have sufficient knowledge of how this phenomenon of sound functions, how it relates to silence, how it relates to each other, what is the relation between the vertical aspect of the music, which comes in chords, and the horizontal, the linear, that has to be, it's like a question of equilibrium, physical equilibrium in the human body. You know, there has to be an equilibrium always, both physically and spiritually, between the vertical and the horizontal. And if you have the will to express things and to bring everything that you know and feel to this expression, and you have knowledge and are conscious of the laws of nature and the laws of the functioning of sound, then you create the illusion. The sonata form is, in a way, a statement of something positive, because you have two subjects usually, one very different from the other, one heroic and one lyric, one masculine and one feminine. And this is why a sonata form, if you want, in music, is such a lesson in life, that we have to know that we always need something to complement us, which is very often in different nature, in order to be able to fulfill ourselves. I think that this is very strong in Beethoven.
me, the sonata is the illustration of how Beethoven can be humoristic. So it's typically the sonata where he shows his humor. And there's so many surprises. He plays with everything. He plays with the form, with the tonality. He plays with everything, basically.
Oh, but you play with so much character and color and characterization. It's really wonderful. This is the most apparent quality in your playing this. And whatever else you learn about music in your life, you mustn't lose that, because this gift for characterization is very, very rare and very seldom. Something very, very precious you have. The problem with having such a creative gift is that I think I would attempt to say, without meaning to, sometimes you feel you can bend even the text for the benefit of the characterization. And you know, there comes a moment when liberty becomes anarchy. And this is, you have to be a little bit, I think, a little bit careful. The first thing about that is the steadiness of the tempo. When you have a piece of music that is constantly using silence, breaks in the music, as an integral part of it, it means it must have a very strict regularity. You know, when you play this is not music for flexibility of the thing, and it's very important that the empty bars, the empty moments, are of exactly the same pulse as the music. Otherwise, you lose the contact between the two of them. I don't want to start going into images, you know, whether this is humor or whatever this is. So much has been written about this. I don't think this is really what we need to deal with now. But we really have to deal with an examination of what is really in there. And then we see several things. First of all, it is based on dynamic contrast. This is why I think there is a good reason for playing the beginning forte and not piano, like in the repeat, so that there is a contrast between, so that you get the commentary of that, that you get a different world, that is not the same. I would make that a little bit clearer. Then you must be also keep the regularity of the articulation. In other words, this, of course, is closed, so you can play legato, which you do. I don't think you should, because the next one you can't do, you have to do. There must be something really absolutely regular. And really keep very clearly, if you can, absolutely steady pulse, and the dynamics totally separated one from the other. What is piano, and what is forte is forte, so that there is no transition. And the last thing, if I may say, be very careful when you play three shortened chords, like, be very careful, because the tendency is to lift the hand for, I don't know for what reason, not just, and to, without meaning to accentuate the last chord. So you hear this, whichever, yum, bum,
Yeah, of course.
yum, bum, bum, yum, bum, bum. And the last one, before the subito forte, I will play a little bit less, yum, bum, bum, yum, bum, bum. And really keep really white and black. Okay? Let's start once more. You said, well, you're rushing. No, you're rushing already. Padam, padam, padam. You make it very hard for me. You make it very, my hand hurts. When you play soft, you lose the sense of the weight of the sound and you get faster.
Okay.
Do the characterization with the volume and with the phrasing, but not with the tempo. Also, be a little bit careful. The second syncopation very often comes too soon, and it is.
Okay. Okay.
Yes. Yes. David, I just want to ask you something. Why do you play now in two bars, huh? You play six. And now suddenly you make.
No, I don't want that.
I think you did the opposite too.
Yes.
The more tempestuous you begin it without an accent, the more you will get of that. Hmm? It's better. It's not quite right yet. It's better. I'll tell you, no, because you have, in order to do that, when you're coming down, I'll do it for you in slow motion. In order to avoid this, you have to play to the end. And come down very carefully. And then, you don't have still the faith in your own control of the speed to place the accent. And that's why it lacks the strength, because you still fall into it. But it's much better. Once more. Yes. Now look, you can really the accent and come down and again. And again. Oh, that's it. No, that's forte, isn't it?
No, it's I don't think there's something.
No?
I don't think in my score
It's forte. It's forte. No, it's forte. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry, in my score, I'm sure it was.
I believe you. But there's definitely forte. I don't know about the score, but it's definitely, because it is always the opposite. This is why there is a question about the beginning.
Okay.
The only reason that there is a question about the beginning, whether it is piano or forte, the beginning of the sonata, is because in the repeat it is forte and then comes piano. But every time in this movement, there is a different dynamic for pam or padam padam. That's really very, I think that's important.
Okay.
No. The second syncopation is padam, padam, padam. No. Sorry. Sorry, I cannot let you get away with it.
Okay.
Run, dun, tom. Run, dun, tom. I know whether your instinct is right because you yum. Also, when you play in forte, make sure that you don't accentuate the end of the group. Otherwise, it doesn't allow you to continue. Now, this is interesting. This is important. In order to do that, you must never give it away before. And make sure you play that it resounds to the end. Yum, commentary, yum, pom, pom, each one. Yeah, no, I want to hear two harmonies. I want to hear the two harmonies. Bravo. Bravo. Very good. Huh?
You asked him if at some point he could orchestrally begin to imagine some of the phrases. Do you think that would be helpful in terms of approaching a piece like this, to imagine the flutes in one part, the bass in another?
I think that this is something that can be helpful in any piece you play on the piano, because the piano, like this, you know, is a very primitive, neutral instrument. Any weight you put on the keys produces a sound. Look. It's a C sharp. It's not particularly interesting what I do with the elbow. You could put an ashtray, anything you can do that. You try and do that on the violin. You get nothing. You have to first find a note, then you have to know how to put the finger, then you have to know how to connect the two hands, then you have to decide so many before you can actually make the equivalent of that. Therefore, the piano is, from that point of view, a very neutral element. And it is precisely this neutrality which gives it the possibility of so much expression, because you can put on the neutral wall any colors you want. You cannot put any colors you want on a wall that already has a color, blue, red, whatever it is. And the neutrality of the piano is what gives it the possibility to be so expressive. But in order to do that, you have to accept the fact that in itself, left to its own devices, it is a very neutral, inexpressive instrument, but that it is open to 20 million different ways of seduction of each finger. And then you get that. And therefore, if you have in your ear the sound of the oboes, or the sound of the violin, or the sound of the chorus, or the sound of the flute, it doesn't have to be that had Beethoven orchestrated it, he would have put the flute. The mere fact that you have that in your ear and you have a sensitivity and an understanding of how the flute sounds in that register will allow you, if you have the necessary manual control, to produce a sound that is much more interesting and more imaginative than the sound that is produced by simply bringing the keys down. in many ways, the essence of Beethoven has very little to do with the zeitgeist, with the spirit of the time of today, where a word like controversy has become a dirty word, a negative word, where we want everything to be smooth, to be accepted by everybody, and now Beethoven music and the indications that he gives in the performance of this music is totally alien to this. It is about the necessity to push yourself to the limit. In the late piano sonatas, you see the writing pushed to both extremes of the keyboard. There is abruptness as well as gentleness. There is nobility as well as very plebeian music, if you want. I think each one of us has to find the images to describe that or not. But I think that this is the essence of Beethoven, is that it does not shy away from the extremes, and it does not look for a synthesis that is made up through a reduction of the different elements.
I think what makes Beethoven so extraordinary in general, and why the reason he captures the imagination of people and has for so many years, is because he shows you his struggles. You know, his compositional problems are apparent in the music. They have to be worked through, and generally one overcomes them at the end of it, when you come to the end of a piece of music. And in the variation movement, the last movement of 109, that's the overcoming of the problems is so profound and so moving that I can't almost think of any other piece of music, except for maybe the other two of those last three sonatas, that equals it.
Bravo. Bravo. Jonathan, you played, it has a wonderful line, you know, the problem with variation, isn't it, is somehow how to find a structure that binds them all together. They are not just a collection of individual variations, and I think you managed to create a wonderful long line from the beginning through the end. I had only one question about that, because it's quite unusual, isn't it, for Beethoven also, that you already in the first variation, the first bar has nothing to do with the theme. It has nothing to do with it melodically, it has nothing to do with it harmonically. You know, the fact that you get this change, and then you get... So I think somehow this is a sign that this first variation must be, in a way, more of a departure from the theme. That's the only, if I can make a small criticism about it, I think I felt it was not clear. In other words, I think a variation can be an ornament, variation can be a transformation, and variation can be a commentary. And I think this one is a commentary, because it has really nothing to do with the fact, besides the fact that it is in the same meter and that it is in the same key, it has really nothing in common. And I think if even maybe a slighter difference in tempo would not be a miss, maybe a little bit slower than the theme. Just to make clear that this is a commentary on what is coming. So that when you get to the next variation, that this is obvious that this is a breaking down, you know. The breakdown. And I think this will give you the possibility to give this second variation maybe a more improvisational quality. In these classes, we spend a lot of time on the beginning. Maybe this is a good opportunity to spend it on the end, get to the end of the piece, and then make the circle to the beginning. So why don't you start there?
From the last variation.
Yeah. Bass and alto. It's not a question of changing of tempo, but it's a question of the direction of tempo. You know, there's basically three, I think there are three, that I know of, three scenarios. The tempo is absolutely steady and has a vertical weight to it. The tempo has a direction to get broader, or the tempo has a direction to get forward. I don't think there is any more. And I think you give wonderfully the feeling of the direction going forward. You really and I think now it must so that, you know, yeah, not a question of changing the tempo, but really stabilizing and changing the direction. Sorry, you know, you lighten it wonderfully, then you don't need quite so much there. I think just the C sharp. You don't even have to play the B. You get the same effect. Look, I don't play the B. That's all I'm doing. That's all you need, and it's plenty. I mean, of course you have to play. But if this is too loud, you take away the possibility of... In other words, what here opens has to close. That's it now. Then you don't need so much guitar then. That's it. Much more organic. Much more organic. Ah, bravo. That was really wonderfully managed. Jonathan, when you get to this, you know, I think that there are some moments in piano playing, in music making, where the lightness of the virtuosity is wonderful, and you get an athletic feeling, when difficult things sound very light and things. There are others where the effort is an integral part of the expression. And to me, the fact, I do it on purpose with two hands, not only because it's easier, but to make the point. You know, when you this effort, I miss the effort. You know, you have a wonderful control of your hand, and it is relatively easy for you to play that. It's harder for me because I have a smaller hand, so maybe I'm overly sensitive to that. But the effort as an integral, in the same way that there must be no effort when you play this, that it must be so absolutely controlled and self-evident, and that's part of it. If you play this with effort, you lose all the expression. But the same way, if you know, real Prometheus, really, you know, the battling with getting the sound out is an integral experience. The more, and you get that in this build-up more and more. There is no effort there. There's hardly there's still no effort. There's tension, and then this you get, because of the harmony you get. That's your first step, and a slight release, and again, and slight release, and again, and then there you get. Look where there's the whole 2/3 of the keyboard is unused. Only this extreme, and then you get. And then only this part of the keyboard. I think all these are integral parts of the expression. You play it a little bit like you have one keyboard, and I think this is in the same way that you don't play with two units, with two hands. You play either with one unit made out of the two hands, or you play with 10 units. The same thing here. Here, you should not play in a one-unit keyboard, but with 88 units, and each one striving and thriving on each other so that you get the effort and the effort of the distance. Sometimes we forget that a big distance is in itself an expressive gesture. It's, of course, it's an expression, and you have the T, and the ninth. This must be, you know. I miss a little bit still of the effort in that. Can maybe one from there. Yes. Now, there. Yes. I think, sorry. I think, Jonathan, in this wonderful, tempestuous sea of pedal, there must also be slight moment of release, otherwise you lose too much of the clarity. I think you need that.
Absolutely.
You need the cleanliness of the moment of the thing before you get the new wave. Yes. And again. Yeah, wonderful. That's wonderful. That's really wonderful. Can we just for a moment examine? Release. Every M. Now, I think now you have an opportunity to go down a little. And again, it's equivalent to that. You come too soon, a hair too soon, but that hair is as valuable as mine, who are very few. And now listen. Don't rush when there is clash. Let it play out. Huh? It's not a marriage dispute. It has to be really played out to its maximum. The clash, somewhere around there. Yeah. Again. Yes. Now don't rush. And you must find, Jonathan, you must find some kind of a tempo relation between the end of the retard and the beginning of the tempo. Otherwise, it will not connect. That's it, perfect. Perfect. Eighth note becomes quarter. Perfect, perfect. It was absolutely organic. Once more, please. Okay, excuse me. I want to now make the parallel between that and the beginning. That's why I stop you here. You know, somehow, play the beginning now as you would want to play the beginning of the piece. That's it. That's it. You see, now you're playing it really, it is obvious. Maybe it was because we were just starting then, it was beginning. But it was already like a reminiscence. That at the beginning, don't forget, the beginning of the movement has no memory. It's very important. And when you come back in the sonata form, when you come to recapitulation, even though it is the same music, even though it is the same notes, it is in a completely different state because it is in a different, you call it whatever you want, psychological state. It has memory. It has something that you have to somehow make audible as you play, which was obviously not there at the beginning. This is the famous question of remembrance and recollection. To remember something is to mechanically remember. I remember I had tea with you on the 17th of June, but the recollection requires something active from us to recollect whatever it is, the physical sensation, the intellectual simulation, it doesn't matter, to recollect what it is. And therefore, when you play the beginning of this, and it's of course very difficult because it has such a feeling of tranquility and quietness that the tendency is to want to play it really so introverted, I would say, in the negative sense now, that it has to have, even though it is quiet and that it has great calmness, that it is a statement, you know. And I think I would play a little, the bass a little bit more active in the dialogue. Because of this. And it influences that. You really do that in the first area. And then when you come back, I would play the theme just a touch slower than at the beginning, so that you are able for yourself, and the active listener will do that with you, to recollect the whole movement. In other words, when you play the first theme, these, the question is, what is he going to say? Where is he going? When you come back, you have to create a possibility for yourself to recollect this, and remember that, and remember that, and remember that, and remember that, and the trills and all this. All this must be put together in this little repeat of the theme, which is anything but a mechanical repeat. And I think you have to use everything at your disposal, every expressive means at your disposal, to make this obvious. And that means maybe a tiny bit under tempo, a slightly less open sound, if you want. Not unlike in a string instrument, when you play just before you get to the bridge, so that it has a very clear quality, or you play on the fingered board, which has a veiled quality to it. I will play also the theme with the minimum amount of pedal to make it legato. You know, I would not play. I would play. Just help the notes to stay, but coming back. You know, it is not so much difference in tempo, no, but one shows you it has a past, and the other only has a future. So why don't you play, I don't know in which order now, just play the trill game. Don't lose the bass, don't lose the bass. You know what is, I think, one of the main difficulties is that if you are playing, if what we are talking, what we are saying is right, and all this has a whole element of recollection, that means that you are reliving something that you already know, and therefore you shouldn't emphasize anything. You emphasize when you are building for the future. You don't emphasize the recollection, otherwise the recollection loses its oneness. Yeah. Don't lose the bass, don't lose the bass. Don't underline. We know it all. Just take time. When you want to underline something, just take just tiny bit of time, then nobody will notice. But don't underline. Bravo. Bravo. Really wonderful, Jonathan.
Stay with BBC4 for the story behind Beethoven's revolutionary Third Symphony, award-winning BBC drama Eroica, next.